Imagine yourself standing in the heart of ancient Rome, surrounded by towering marble temples, fountains, and the constant hum of daily life. Merchants shout prices for olives and wine, children run through the streets, and senators stroll past in their flowing togas. But amid this bustling city, you notice another kind of market, one that feels far darker. Here men, women, and even children are lined up, stripped of clothing, tagged with placards around their necks, and displayed before crowds of eager buyers. This is not a place for goods or produce. It is a marketplace of flesh, where human beings are sold as possessions. In Rome, slavery was not hidden away behind closed doors. It was displayed openly in the marketplace. To the Romans, this was business as usual. To us, it is a chilling glimpse into one of the most disturbing aspects of their civilization.
Before we dive in, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more shocking and bizarre stories from history.
The slave markets of Rome, bodies for sale. The Roman Empire was built on the backs of slaves. At its height, nearly 1 in every 3 people in Rome was enslaved, making the empire one of the largest slave societies in history. Conquests fueled this system. When Roman legions marched into Gaul, Greece, Egypt, or the Middle East, they did not simply take land and treasure. They took people. Captured warriors, civilians, and entire communities were dragged back to Rome, destined for the auction block. Slaves were not limited to field work. They were essential in every aspect of Roman life, tending vineyards, grinding grain, building roads, tutoring children, entertaining at feasts, and serving as personal attendants. For the elite, a household without slaves was unthinkable, and some of the wealthiest aristocrats owned hundreds, even thousands. To the Romans, slavery was not only an institution, it was the very foundation of their economy and social order. The marketplace of flesh. The slave market, known as the Forum Venalium, was the stage where this system revealed itself most clearly. In Rome itself, and in ports like Delos, slaves were paraded for sale as casually as cattle. They were made to stand naked, regardless of age or gender, so potential buyers could examine their bodies for health, strength, or deformities. Around their necks hung placards listing details, their origin, their skills, and often their limitations. Buyers would prod their muscles, check their teeth, and test their endurance, treating them as animals to be inspected. Young women and boys were especially vulnerable, as their qualities were appraised with an unspoken but obvious sexual undertone. For the wealthy, purchasing an exotic slave, perhaps a blonde-haired Gaul, a tall German, a refined Greek philosopher, or an African servant, was not only about utility, but about status and desire. The slave market was as much about indulgence as it was about labor, a cruel spectacle where human life was reduced to a price tag. Sex, status, and exploitation. Behind the cold economics of the market lay another, darker truth. Many slaves were purchased not for labor, but for pleasure. Roman law allowed masters to use their slaves sexually without restriction, and an entire category of enslaved people existed as concubines or entertainers. Young women could be bought as household mistresses, and boys were often taken as companions for powerful men. Brothels across Rome were stocked with slaves whose bodies could be rented out for profit, and unlike free prostitutes, these men and women had no choice in their fate. To own an attractive slave was a mark of luxury, just as owning fine jewelry or art demonstrated wealth. Yet there were rare exceptions. Some concubines gained influence by capturing the affection of their masters, receiving gifts, or even manumission. A few became wealthy courtesans, leaving behind their servitude altogether. But for the vast majority, the slave market was the beginning of a life of sexual exploitation, humiliation, and powerlessness. Resistance, survival, and small freedoms. And yet, not all slaves were silent in their suffering. Some resisted in the only ways they could, by fleeing, sabotaging their work, or refusing obedience. Runaways were common, though the consequences were severe. A captured fugitive might be branded on the forehead with the letters FUG, short for fugitivus, marking them forever as an escapee, or even crucified as a warning to others. But many chose subtler strategies of survival. Some worked to earn their master's trust, securing better treatment or lighter duties. Others hoped for manumission, the Roman practice of granting freedom. A loyal or skilled slave might one day be freed and become a libertus, a freedman with legal rights, though often still tied by obligation to their former master. A few freedmen rose to prominence, even amassing fortunes of their own. But these stories were rare exceptions. For most, survival meant enduring day by day, hoping that loyalty or fortune might someday release them from chains. Slavery and entertainment, gladiators and performers. Not all slaves ended up in households or farms. Some were condemned to the arena. Gladiators, though celebrated today as symbols of Roman bravery, were often slaves forced to fight for the entertainment of the masses. These men were trained like athletes but lived like prisoners, with the constant threat of death hanging over them. Many became icons of fame, cheered by crowds, yet they were still property, owned and controlled by their masters. Others became performers, singers, or actors, used to entertain Roman society in theaters and private banquets. In some cases, even their artistic talent became another form of enslavement, binding them to patrons who profited from their performances. The spectacle of the Colosseum and the theaters of Rome was built not just on artistry and skill, but on the suffering of those who had no choice in the matter. The price of a human life. What was the value of a human being in Rome? The answer depended on age, gender, skills, and beauty. A healthy farm laborer might fetch a modest sum, while an educated Greek slave, skilled in philosophy or medicine, could sell for the price of a small estate. Young, attractive women and boys were often most expensive, prized as luxury possessions. Children were sometimes sold cheaply, considered investments for the future. For Rome, people were commodities, and the market operated with the same cold efficiency as trade in grain or livestock. Records show enormous profits were made from this trade, and entire fortunes were built by those who trafficked in human lives. To stand in a Roman slave market was to see human dignity reduced to numbers, to watch lives change forever by the raising of a hand or the clink of a coin. The morality of a slave society. What strikes us today as cruel and inhuman was, to the Romans, a matter of normalcy. Slavery was considered natural, even necessary. Philosophers like Aristotle argued that some people were slaves by nature, destined to serve. Cicero, the great Roman statesman, defended slavery as the foundation of order and civilization. Yet not every Roman was blind to its brutality. Writers such as Seneca, though himself a slaveholder, occasionally acknowledged the cruelty of treating men as mere property. Later, Christianity would challenge some aspects of this system, teaching that all souls were equal before God. But even early Christians were often slave owners themselves, accepting slavery as part of society. It was only with the collapse of the empire and the transformation of Europe that Rome's great slave markets eventually disappeared. Yet the echoes of those markets lingered, influencing later systems of slavery in the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and beyond. Conclusion. The slave markets of Rome reveal a disturbing paradox at the heart of the ancient world. Rome gave us law, architecture, literature, and philosophy, but it also built its empire on the suffering of millions of people stripped of freedom and dignity. In the markets, beneath the grandeur of temples and arches, human beings were reduced to property, their lives measured in coins. For the Romans, this was ordinary life. For us, it is a chilling reminder of how easily cruelty can be normalized when it benefits the powerful. And perhaps the most haunting question is this: when we study the slave markets of Rome, are we only peering into the past, or do we see a warning for our own times, a mirror reflecting the dangers of exploitation that can arise whenever society values profit over humanity?
If you enjoyed this deep dive into ancient scandal, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another story from the strange and shocking side of history.